Welcome to r/malicious compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. The first story. Sales rep beat about a $200 bonus after we forgot to deduct a $720 chargeback. Walked away losing $520 after we fixed the mistakes on his pay. The second story. Boss told us to install boards without proper nails or screws, and a piece fell and broke an air conditioner line and flooded the place. The third story. Department relies on fast employee. Manager bans music. Chaos ensues. Manager realizes mistake. On to the first story. Sometimes it's best to let mistakes be mistakes, but sure, we'll get this payroll issue corrected for you. For a brief moment in time, I was an interim sales manager at a marketing company. Some backgrounds. Sometimes, especially in our retail space, clients would want to spend a lot of ad dollars in a short time period, i.e. Black Friday sales or what have you. Generally, clients would like to arrange for the ad campaign months in advance of it actually being installed. This also gave the client the option of spreading their ad spend over several months. Say a client wanted to spend $10K for a 3-week run-up. Well, if he started out to say 5 months ahead of time, we could just bill them $2K a month for every month, and they got to spread out the spend. When deals like this came up, salespeople would have the option of getting 30% of their commission advanced, or they could wait until the contract was installed. If they got an advance and the customer canceled, they would owe their advance back as a chargeback. Really good salespeople tended to just say, screw it, pay me when it goes live, and mediocre sales reps tended to take the advances. Cue Joe. Joe was a mediocre sales rep. Joe wrote a deal that was worth about $2,400 in commissions, and Joe decided he wanted an advance. So we cut Joe a $720 check, and said the rest would be paid out when the account installs, as we called it. This was before I was interim sales manager. I became interim sales manager, and the month I became sales manager, the account Joe had written canceled the deal for reasons. Joe was set to receive a $720 chargeback. At the same time, this was end of quarter, and based upon Joe's performance, he had earned himself a $2,500 bonus. Commission statements came out, and Joe came to complain to me about how his commission was wrong. He pointed out that his bonus was supposed to be $2,500, but he only got $2,300. They forgot his review bonus. I looked at his statement and noticed the $720 chargeback was missing. I sat down with Joe and said, hey, look, I can ask payroll to fix your bonus and get you that extra $200, but payroll also forgot to charge you back $720. I think it's best we leave this be, because you're actually $520 ahead. Joe got upset. I think he felt like I was trying to rip him off. I really wasn't. And I said, Joe, if I ask payroll to fix your commission, they're going to notice you didn't get the $720 chargeback. They'll give you the extra $200 for the bonus, plus take $720 back, so you lose $520. Yes, your statement is incorrect, but it's incorrect $520 in your favor. Joe and I had some back and forth, and I was finally like, all right, Joe, I'll go to payroll to get your issue fixed. I go to payroll, point out the error. I didn't bring up the chargeback. I was kind of hoping payroll would just not notice that, but they did. And payroll emailed me back and said, thanks for pointing out our error. We'll give Joe an extra $200 for his review bonus, and we'll also be issuing the $720 chargeback for the lost account, for a net adjustment of negative $520. So I forwarded the email to Joe and said, congrats, Joe. Payroll will be paying out your $200 review bonus. However, they're also going to charge you back $720, for a net adjustment of negative $520 on your next pay statement. To which Joe came into my office in a bit of shock and said, so they fixed my pay and now I lose $520? I go, yes. Because they forgot about the chargeback, right? I go, yes. He bows his head in disappointment and goes, I should have kept my mouth shut, shouldn't I? I said, yes. He goes, can we just tell them to leave everything as is? And I go, nope. He goes, F. And I go, I'm sorry, Joe. And he goes back to work. Joe, the mediocre sales rep, chose to take an advance on his commission rather than waiting for the deal to be installed, which ultimately resulted in him owing the company money when the account was canceled. When Joe later realized that his commission statement was incorrect, he wanted it fixed without considering the potential ramifications. Ultimately, they decided to be honest and correct the mistake, even though it meant Joe losing money. This decision highlights the importance of integrity and the fact that sometimes it's best to let mistakes be mistakes, rather than trying to fix them at the expense of others. In the end, Joe learned a valuable lesson about the consequences of his actions and the importance of thinking before acting. The second story is, we don't have the right screws or nails for the work we're doing, but you still want us to keep working? Sure, boss. This was about 7 years ago when I first started working as a carpenter in a fairly large city doing commercial work. This was maybe my second job, so I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was trying my best. We were doing all types of random stuff. Drywall, framing, doors, trim work, crown molding, and it was all a lot all at once. But I was trying. My boss at the time would constantly be an a-hole to me every chance he got to show me up. Not even a, hey man, this is how you should do this for X, Y, and Z reason. It was always a sort of, hey R, stop effing around. Like I said, I was new and figured, oh, that's just how construction workers are. So I brushed it off and tried to keep going. It got to the point where my boss flipped out on me one day for forgetting to put someone else's nail gun away. Because I was an apprentice, I was at fault, because I wasn't aware there was a gun out that wasn't put away the night before. My boss flipped and threatened to fire me when one of the other journeymen stepped up and started yelling back, "Fire me, dude, it was my gun. This guy is trying." I'll always remember that, but it was sort of us versus him. Fast forward a couple of weeks and we're putting up crown molding, and first we were putting up pieces of 1x3 on the wall at the height of the bottom of the crown molding, so the crown would have better way to install, which is also known as a nailer. Anyway, we were to glue the backs and we were using finish nails at an angle to tack, temporarily hold the boards to the wall while the glue dried. It was madness in there that day. Everyone was running around like an a-hole and we started to run out of nails. We only had much shorter nails that barely even went through the wood enough to poke into the wall behind it. Half the time our nailer boards were falling off the wall. We all told our boss this and he said, "It's fine, just keep going." Okay, boss. We're firing in as many nails as we can trying to get these boards to stick. We didn't even have screws long enough to use. Rather than us going to do something else instead of him making a run to Home Depot, we kept going. Other trades were trying to get their work done too. The wallpaper guys had to pull out the air conditioner and heater combos away from the wall so they could get their paper behind it somewhat while trying to install our boards. The danger in this is that all the air conditioners are plumbed together for their coolant using a mix of 50-50 water and alcohol. I told my boss that we should make a couple little boxes that will go over these flexible plumbing lines behind the air conditioners so they don't break. He said it would take too much time. The nails we were using would have worked to make these little boxes since we could shoot them straight in, whereas the boards we were using for the walls, the nails were going in at an angle, which effectively means it has to go through more wood before it hits the actual wall, which is why the nails were too short for the wall. Going straight into the wall was working even less successfully, even though more of the nail was in the wall. It was the combination one nail below at an angle going down and another above at angle up that was keeping the boards from falling straight out. We could have used scrap pieces of wood to make these boxes, but if he saw us using them, he would have flipped on us for wasting time. Well, the inevitable happened and one of our nailer pieces fell straight down the wall and hit one of those coolant lines. 15,000 gallons of coolant shot straight out of the wall, blasted the air conditioner out of the way and was hitting the wall about 15 feet away. The system had an industrial-sized pump in the basement to continuously force the coolant mix through the whole building's coolant system, so it was very pressurized. It poured for about 20 minutes straight. Some people left their tools, phones, and lunchboxes in that room and ran in to save them and came back completely soaked after only a couple of seconds. There was no shutoff valve because it broke off, and the nearest one was in some unknown access panel somewhere that nobody knew about. All the air conditioners lost their coolant, so there was no air conditioners working for any of the rooms in the hotel. We only renovated 2 floors at a time, so every other floor had occupants in it. This was also in the middle of summer. All that water flooded down through the lower floors, which just happens to be on top of a newly finished banquet hall that we had just completed. Nearly all the ceiling tile that we had installed in that 200 by 100 room had been soaked. The patterned ritzy carpet was soaking in alcohol and water. 100 rooms below the room had been soaked. It was an effing nightmare, all because my boss wanted us to keep going instead of getting us the right supplies. The company went under. I saw that foreman later on at a union meeting. He sat behind me and I can't believe he had the balls to talk to me. I'm sure he was either just going through a rough time in his life, or he really is just an a-hole, but he never apologized. He acted like it never happened. I don't know. I know he still works in our area for other companies. Maybe not a boss or foreman, but I'm sure I'll still run into him again. Your boss was more interested in being a jerk than actually doing things the right way. Bad leadership and lack of communication can lead to a disastrous outcome. It's essential to have good leadership that listens to the team's concerns and makes informed decisions. The boss in this story was too focused on getting the job done, rather than taking the time to assess the situation and find the best course of action, and the result was a major mess. I hope you found a better boss who actually cares about doing things the right way, and maybe knows what a screw and nail are. At least you now have a hilarious story to tell at parties about the time you accidentally flooded a hotel with 15,000 gallons of coolant. The last story is, it's usually not a good idea to peeve off the person who keeps the department ahead of schedule. So I work for a grocery store as a personal shopper for their in-house grocery pickup and delivery service. Not to toot my own horn, but I am uncontestedly the fastest and best employee in the entire day shift. For context, I can pick around 100 to 120 unique items per hour while the average person does around 60, which is the expected minimum. It's safe to say that this department relies on me quite heavily, to the point where the department manager has to find 2 people to replace me when I can't come to a shift. This is mainly because I find the job pretty boring, so I throw in an AirPod and listen to music. I'm fast mainly because it makes me feel like I'm actually doing something while I'm here. It's also important to note that there's no incentive for me to perform more than anyone else. I don't get paid more, there's no recognition, I just do it because it keeps me busy. Now, one of the assistant store managers doesn't like me. I can't figure out the reason, but she doesn't. Either way, she decided today that it would now be a rule that you couldn't listen to music while picking groceries, as they didn't know what you were listening to. Nothing in relation to not being able to hear customers, which I could anyways. Now I asked others about this tile, and they hadn't been told anything and were still wearing earbuds and listening to music. It's important for us to have at least 1 hour buffer. It allows us to call customers to review changes made to their order, and then adjust anything as per their request. This is how we ensure their satisfaction. Today it was really busy. We could barely keep that buffer with me at full productivity, which I was until being told no more music. That's when things began to nosedive and fast. Within half an hour, we had lost half of our buffer, and by the time I was done my pick, we had completely lost it. This ASM is now being chewed out by the GM because we were behind, and that's a serious issue. She then looks at the chart that shows our pick rates and asks him where I am, explaining that we shouldn't be behind with me there. All the while, I'm sitting there taking my sweet A time writing bin tags until she confronts me as to why I'm picking so slowly. I explained that I had no obligation to go above and beyond, and that because there was a clear double standard being held, I didn't see a reason to perform at a higher level than the rest of the department. After the cogs in her head finally stopped turning, she realized that it's probably best if she allows me to listen to my music and sends me on my way. Within 2 hours, I've created us an hour buffer again. Needless to say, she learned an important lesson in cause and effect today that I doubt she'll be forgetting soon. I can understand why they want us to be able to hear them. After all, people stocking shelves only specialize in one section, while we go around the whole store. Problem is that by having us help customers, it slows down the rate at which we can pick. In the end, corporate will always choose the option that requires them having to pay less people, and that's how we end up doing both. Assistant store manager's decision to ban music while picking groceries ended up causing the department to fall behind schedule, which ultimately led to her being chewed out by the GM. It's interesting to see how one person's individual performance can have such a significant impact on the department's productivity, and how a change in policy can either enhance or hinder that performance. Sometimes the best employees aren't motivated solely by incentives, but rather by the desire to feel engaged and productive in their work. I hope you enjoyed these stories. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.